Joining me right now is Oklahoma Senator and member of the Senate Homeland Security Committee, James Lankford. Senator, good to see you this morning. Thanks very much. First, give us your sense of the implications of this Georgia runoff result. What does that mean for the Senate in 2023, the GOP Senate and its expectations for investigations and policy change?
Yeah, it's a very significant loss, actually, because as your reporter just mentioned, when we had a 50-50 Senate, every single committee was equally divided 50-50, both in funding on both sides and also on membership on both sides. Now a 51-49 Senate is very, very different. Democrats will have the lead in every single committee. They'll have 2/3 of the funding in every single committee. They'll have the power to do subpoenas. They'll be doing their own investigations. So it's very, very different as far as how the Senate will actually operate. Now, obviously, the House of Representatives is a Republican House. We'll have a fully controlled Democrat Senate now in 2023. The American people have spoken on this. That is a very divided government. The American people want to be able to see some results out of this, but they're very frustrated with what's actually happening in the country.
Well, I mean, is it possible for now maybe your colleagues to say that they'll hold the line on spending and not go along with Democrats and agree to massive, reckless spending, as has been the case in the last year? Until this administration sends some money to the border? I mean, let's face it, Senator, the president traveled to Arizona yesterday, but he refused to go to the border. Okay, he's right there miles away from Yuma, where we see the gotaways coming in every day, 1 million gotaways. We don't know their intentions. They're obviously bad hombres. Otherwise, they would have wanted to get apprehended. And here's what he told Peter Doocy yesterday. Watch this.
Mr. President, why go to a border state and not visit the border? More importantly, going on is we invest billions of dollars in the inside.
So, Senator, he says he has more important things to do despite 5 million people crossing illegally into America on his watch. Do you think your colleagues will stop and hold the line on reckless spending until money goes to the border agents?
So two things with this. One is he stated out loud what all of us knew he's believed and what his policies has been, is what's happening with illegal immigration is not important to him. The country's been screaming to be able to stop all this illegal immigration, and he's just ignored it month after month after month, and it just said it's not important. Literally 200,000 plus people illegally crossing the border every single month. He just doesn't care. The Border Patrol's saying over and over again, as we're flooded with people, the cartels are sending record amounts of fentanyl and cocaine and heroin and other drugs into our cities and other spots, and we can't stop it because we're managing so many people that are coming across the border. And literally, he just doesn't care and says, that's not my problem. That's going to be something else's problem. I've got more important things to do. So it is frustrating for the American people. It is frustrating for us to continue to be able to raise this. It is essential that we continue to be able to finish out the wall, that we get the technology of the Border Patrol. But the most important thing is the policies that need to be in place to be able to stop this constant flow of people and to stop the administration from incentivizing folks coming across the border. When they cross the border, this administration gives them a 10-year work visa for illegally crossing the border. That is their reward. So that incentivizes more people coming. We got to stop that.
10-year work visa. Look, what I'm asking you is, what are you going to do about it? Because all of these issues that you just put forth are not new. This has been going on now for 2 years on this president's watch. So, you know, there's been the CHIPS Act, there's been the infrastructure, there's been all of this stuff where Republicans teamed up with Democrats. Instead of holding the line and saying, I'm not agreeing on anything until money goes to the border, will you do it?
Yeah, 100%. I would tell you both those bills that you just mentioned, I did exactly that. I voted against those and said we have got to stop. We've got to be able to control not only our spending, but the border. I serve on the Homeland Security Committee. It was our hope that we would win the Senate and we'd be able to bring oversight. Currently, Senate Democrats are doing no oversight on the border at all. They don't want to discuss it. They also think it's not important. So we're going to see oversight hearings in the House, but with Senate Democrats still in control, they're going to continue to do everything they can to be able to protect this president. Our focus is, how can we make progress, even if it's incremental, to be able to raise these issues?
Okay.
Senator Steger-McDowell, but there have been an embarrassing number of your Republican colleagues in the Senate voting alongside Democrats for spending, inflationary spending. There were 17 Republican senators who voted in favor of this CHIPS boondoggle, which President Biden was touting yesterday, including the Republican leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, and Lindsey Graham. Why don't they know any better?
Well, I would still say if 17 Republicans vote for that, the majority of Republicans in the Senate voted against that by far. And you'll see that in several bills. Myself and several others voting against this, speaking out against it, saying we got to be able to get control. And right now we're focused a lot as conservatives on what the House can do. I came into the House in 2011. There was a Democrat Senate and a Democrat president at that time. We were able to get the Budget Control Act, just controlling just the House, and to be able to actually bring spending down 2 years in a row by only running the House at that point and using our leverage that we have. So we're counting a lot on the House and them stepping up to be able to do this, put pressure on the Senate on it. We're also going to continue to be able to put pressure on our colleagues to say we've got to wake up at the amount of debt and deficits that's happening in the country, as I've said over and over again for year after year now.
Well, if 8.5% inflation, which is where the consumer price index was roughly last year, when your Republican colleagues, those 17 senators, signed on to that CHIPS boondoggle, if that wasn't enough to wake them up, I don't know if they'll, perk up now. But thankfully, the Republicans are controlling the purse strings now in the House.
Yeah, well, in the House anyway. Go ahead, Rob Astorino.
Right.
Senator, a month ago we were hoping for a red wave. Today, a month later, with the loss in Georgia, it's sort of like code red. And I'm worried about what wasn't talked about. Now that the Senate is Democrat, the confirmation hearings. Which of these appointments are really worrisome that are now going to be able to get passed with a Democratic majority?
Yeah, so very perceptive of you to bring that up, because that's a very significant issue for us. When you have a divided Senate equally and all committees on it, every person that comes to the nomination process, if it's equally divided in the committee, it takes a long time to get to the floor. They can get it to the floor, but it takes a lot more time, and so it dramatically slows down these really bad nominees. Now with a 51-49 Senate next year, they'll be able to expedite all these nominees, and we won't be able to slow them down in committee or on the floor at all. So the worst of the worst of their nominees that they have not been able to get through, the Biden administration can bring right back up again in January, and to be able to force those through, and Republicans in the Senate won't be able to stop it. And we'll see this in EEOC, we'll see this in EPA, we'll see this in labor, we'll see this in all the areas that directly affect business the most, that Biden will now be unrestrained in who he can put in to do heavy regulations and literally invent new regulations they can throw out on business across America.
Yeah, well, you won't be able to also decide what comes to the floor, right? I mean, have you had any hearings on the origins of COVID-19?
We've had none on that, and because Republicans are not able to actually control what actually comes out of a committee, set the agenda for any committee, or set the floor schedule. The majority leader of the Senate actually sets that, and Schumer has not brought that up. Not only that, this week and next week, we're trying to deal with 12 appropriation bills that Schumer has had literally 12 months to be able to work through, not even touched it. It's never even come through subcommittees in the Senate. The National Defense Authorization, we're just now getting to in the final days. It's 4,400 pages that was just released last night that no one's been able to actually go through because Schumer's clock management is so bad on our calendar.
Unbelievable. So if you haven't had any hearings on the origins of COVID, you haven't had any hearings on the crisis at the border, what are the hearings about?
Well, the hearings mostly are what they call a budget hearing. It's a standard once a year hearing that Ali Mayorkas and Homeland Security or others will come up to. We'll say we're presenting our budget. We'll have a budget hearing, and then it just goes away. But again, the Senate Democrats refuse to have any hearings dealing with real oversight in any of these issues, and that becomes the challenge for us getting it out. That's why it's so important. At least we have Republicans in the House. They can start having these hearings.
Yeah, and they are. Senator, thank you very much. James Lankford is in D.C. this morning. We so appreciate your time and your leadership. We'll be right back.
Good to see you.